Good afternoon. My name is Sandra Vieira Jürgens, and I will be moderating the conversation with Javiera Bedini, curator of the exhibition Broken Secrets, and Anna-Kaisa Rastenberger. Let me start by thanking to Javiera and Anna-Kaisa, also Rebecca, and the parallel the opportunity to discuss these issues with us. I will ask directly Javiera. Javiera, it is possible to give us a brief presentation of the 4 projects included in the exhibition, The Broken Secrets?
Yes, of course. I think it's important to say that there is a website with more information regarding every single artist, and there's also the catalog. I think just to very briefly say that the exhibition Broken Secrets was inspired by, in English we say open secrets, right? So you can have a secret that's been open. And I wanted to play with that and play with the words and say a broken secret because it regards secrets both in the private and in the public realms that have been broken or opened up. And in that sense, they've got the opportunity or the possibility to either make something constructive or deteriorate us or the society, right? I think that it's drawing on historical and contemporary narratives, and it investigates distrust and deception, showing the fragility of institutional and personal connections and questioning the line between truth and falsehood. So there are 4 projects. And I'm just going in order of the catalog. The first is Gorgs, who's done a beautiful project called Motherland Far Beyond the Polar Circle. And it's a visual and investigative journey where he actually last summer, 2019, winter, he travels to Igarka. He goes through, and he goes to that place specifically because it's where many Latvians once lived. On June 14th, his grandmother was deported to Siberia and has never said a word about it. So I think that what most intrigued me about this project is that very silence, the fact that that his grandmother never said anything about it, and his work is kind of uncovering these truths that were hidden for so long and have been. We then go on to George, and his project is called Human Exploitation. In human exploitation, we have, we look at 1996, which is when the US Department of Defense released experts of the Human Resource Exploitation Manual, which is a standard textbook for students at the US Army School of Americas. It's called SOA, which is an American military training academy set up in 1946 in Panama for Latin American soldiers. And using this manual and the work of 2 geographers based in the University of Milwaukee, he creates these collages, and it's really got a quite a unique look and feel, but it's again uncovering truths between America and Latin America, right? And of course everything that ensues from there. Then there is Yushin, who's got a larger body of work called the Instagram Project. And it's a constellation of work that looks at Instagram as a site of consumption of Chinese as spectacle or as the other. She's using satire, she's using humor, and within this broad framework, she produced 2 projects called The Quirky Science Questions and Provocative Jokes Deconstructed. Quirky Science Questions is a set of worksheets that she made together with a teacher, and she superimposes these Instagram images, but she's making she's making sense of this Instagram account, which she doesn't want to mention, so I'm not going to mention, because I think that by mentioning it we give it power. Yeah, it's always making fun of Chinese people, and it is from a completely Western perspective. So also very, very powerful work. And lastly, we have Negar, whose work is called The Smell of Earth and Tree. And this project was taken from the name was taken from a diary of a sailor. So she's looking at the history of maritime trade in the Persian Gulf and the complex web of exchanges that strongly affected lifestyle in the region. So she's looking particularly at Iranian and Indian individuals and how they've kind of reconstructed a space of hybridity where vast cultures kind of intertwine and create something different. And yeah, she goes on, again, she's moving and she explores towns in the Persian Gulf. And just to end off very briefly, I think all 4 projects, you know, while I could say Negad and Gorgs have a similar aesthetic, although not really, all 4 projects are wildly different. And I think that was the challenge with the projects. But what interested me, aside from the, you know, the difference in the aesthetics, was the challenge of kind of uniting this through the methodology of Broken Secrets.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you. And how the curatorial process and selection of works evolved? Did the issue, the line between truth and falsehood, come first or appear after the selection of artists?
Yeah, so that's actually an interesting point. The way Parallel works is we were, of course, the 6 curators and then the 30 plus minus artists. And the interesting thing is that we were all actually exactly a year ago, it would have been a year ago, right? We were all in Dublin. And the curators had to present their projects and the artists had to present their projects. I would be lying if I said I didn't have a sense, because I think just having gotten to know the artists, I had an idea of what they would be exploring or the subject matter. But what I'm trying to say is that in Dublin is when I presented the project. So the project came first and then the selection of artists came second. And that's when we were helped by Nomaduma Masilela and Anna-Kaisa in this process of kind of contemplating how to structure and how to construct a narrative, how to construct a kind of argument and the selection process. And yeah, at the time, I think what really set me off on this, because originally I wanted to investigate migration because of my own history and my own interests. But there was a moment, this is just before the Corona outbreak. And I was devastated to learn about Dr. Li Wei Lang, who was forced to sign a statement denouncing an unfounded illegal rumor. And of course, this is what we've come to know, and this is what has shaped the last year of all of our existence. And I think that is something that I had been thinking about, you know, truth or falsehood for a long time. But that kind of, when I heard and started reading about that particular case, it kind of offset the arguments. And I think at the time as well, the Spanish government had just sentenced the political prisoners in Catalonia, people that were wanting independence. And of course, my own history coming from Chile and Argentina and South Africa, and the loaded politics that living and coming from those places entail, there's always been a natural kind of inclination towards wanting to know the truth or striving for the truth. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anna-Kaisa, in this project, Javiera questions the existence of a single truth, proposing the idea of hundreds of truths. This question is crucial for photography. How this statement leads us to reflect on narratives and the essence of photographic practices. For you, what's your opinion? Does the modern opposition between the aesthetics of realism and the aesthetics of montage still make sense today?
Yeah, this is obviously an important question that maybe I could start from, because if you don't mind, from the process of Javiera and her project, because then that is kind of leading to your question is that when Javiera was starting to work on this kind of a question of revealing something, or kind of these questions of multiple truths, it's also something that was related to, in my opinion, the kind of profession of like a curator and curatorial process. And in my opinion, this is a very important part of Javiera's project and curatorial processes in general, that it's kind of a always educational process, which is related to knowledge production. And in Javiera's case now, she's working on projects, photographic projects that are also related to knowledge production and how the knowledge is produced in those projects. Every one of the projects Javiera picked up, all those photographers are dealing the questions different ways, but the kind of it's this kind of a double layered, very interesting concept, which I found like a super rewarding when I saw Javiera working with this project. But to come to your answer, that I don't believe anymore any kind of a photographic truth without contextualization. And aesthetics is also one kind of a context, which is produced through certain kind of quality production, which is related to different conventions that we have learned through the history of photography. So if we call something like if we talk about photographic quality, or how the photography is representing the truth or referring the reality, it's very much related to the conventions we have learned. And in that sense, I think that Javiera's project is even more important in that sense. So maybe if I understood your question right, maybe this kind of a collage, was it the word about this kind of montage? Maybe that's really the way that I believe in, and it's kind of a collage or montages of different truths that are present in both in images and people who are receiving the images, the different spectators.
But do you agree with this great quotation of Brecht in the Three Penny Opera, that he referred to the complexity of the legibility of the images? A simple reproduction of reality say less than ever something about reality. A photograph of the crop factory or IAG does not prove anything about these institutions. In other words, the images do not tell us anything. They lie if we don't not analyze or decompose them. Do you agree?
Yeah. I do agree, but I would of course first ask that who are we who are analyzing the images, and like how we can include so many different ways of analyzing images. But I very much agree that, especially at the moment, as we've seen on the era of post-truth, that it's more important than ever to learn about images and learn about how they function and learn about also how they have been used in different purposes. Because as we have learned that some images can carry and transmit meanings that are totally controversial, and then we need much more of this kind of some kind of image visual literacy, and also ways of including different people to this conversation about images.
Javiera?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it's very important to contextualize. I'm a huge fan of Brecht, but of course we're in an entirely different dispensation in Germany, and was it 1930 The three, yeah, Three Penny Opera. Yeah, we're in a totally different. Of course, Europe is in a different realm. America's just had the crash. What is it called? The 1929. The crash, the Wall Street crash.
Depression.
Yes, yeah, exactly. There's the Great Depression. So to kind of I think Brecht, to bring in Brecht is an interesting thing. I'm not entirely familiar with the Three Penny Opera, but I think I'm not entirely sure that I agree or disagree. I think it would do it injustice to just give a no or yes. I think if someone takes a photograph, the thing that it's proving is that they were there. And even if they were not there, or what they photograph, whether it's a factory or a person, the fact that they dedicated the time to something means they constructed something. And if someone constructed something, whether it's true in real life or whether it's true in their mind, it has value. And so I don't know, I'm someone who believes that freedom and creativity begins in the mind. And Anna, you were speaking about the era of post-truth. Brecht is speaking about a lot of things, and of course within the context of theatre, or meta theatre rather, it's a very interesting to put these two, whether it's photography or theatre, to put these two elements alongside each other to come up with interpretations, and that's all it is. And in the paper, which you might have read, the Hundreds of Truths, is exactly this: is that we all interpret images in a different way. Images, I mean the photography, or whether it's the theatre, we're all listening differently. We're all looking at color differently. So what I'm getting at is that it's relative. And of course, it's always political. If it's Brecht, he's probably critiquing capitalism, as well as many other things. Yeah, I think I didn't answer the question.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
The
question is, can an image help us to know better? I think that is the fundamental.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, but I think also it depends who's looking at the image, right? And what knowledge that person has, and especially right now, is that person thinking, and what do we regard as thinking, right? There's a huge danger to it. But my straight answer would be yes, it does help.
I would actually like to bring in the name Svetlana Alexievich. You were referring, Javiera, in your text, and it started with a quotation from Svetlana Alexievich. And for me, she is one of the authors that really are able to create a piece of art which brings in the understanding of how different truths are actually, how the world is, how it is, everything we try to understand, it's consisting from different points of view. And I really love to see her quotation at the beginning of your
you actually introduced her work to me in Budapest. In Budapest, when we were at the bookshop, you said there's one book you have to read about.
Okay,
and so I bought it. Look what
I'm kind of is relational.
Yeah, so I'm thanking but it's
yeah, you're quoting yourself. You
oh yes, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. But that's also related to that question, that at the moment I don't think that we can even talk about image in the singular. We cannot talk about truth in the singular. We cannot talk image in the singular either.
Yeah.
And neither photograph as a singular. So it is something that we are in kind of a now this is, please Rebecca, you can edit this, epistemological shift what comes to photography. Definitely when when we are not, it's already since decades, we cannot talk anymore about how images are or photographs are representing and referring to reality, but we need to talk about how they are functioning and how we as human beings are functioning with the images and how they make us function or operate in a certain way. So all this is related to a question that the question was that can an image help us to know better? I think that images can help us to understand things from different perspectives, and that is important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the crucial function of the narrative in photography, I think that you agree that the constitution of series and the presence of writing is more suited to the creation of stories in photography. How does the unique image look today? You refer to that. I think that one image is in crisis today because we need a series and we need some text to contextualize the works of the artists. No?
If you say an image without any kind of contextualization, I would say that it's not in crisis, but it's at least for me, it's unimportant. It's kind of it's empty, and it's, or on the other hand, it's kind of a treasure bag with full of things that you have to read out one by one. The context, the aesthetics, the rhetorics, the circumstances, like what made this specific image possible, which is like super important and super societal way to approach images. So at the same time, I would answer that one image is empty with if you are not allowed to work on the image. But if you are, then it's kind of it can open in a multiple different ways.
Javiera, you feel important the writing associated with photography? Well, some free projects of your 4 artists have the presence of writing. Yes, the archives and the writing.
Yeah, that's true. And as you and Sandra was speaking, I was thinking about the different projects, and I think you know, the use of language works very differently. I do think it's very important to contextualize, and I think it's dangerous. And I'm speaking from a curatorial perspective. Everyone has a different method. You know, you can be minimalist, but I think the more research you have and the more you can communicate what it is that's guiding the exhibition and what narrative you've constructed, the better it is. So in that sense, I think writing and reading is very important, because I think it's dangerous to put a photo up of something or someone without really knowing the implications that it has. It can, I think, sometimes be irresponsible. But if I can just draw some examples, you know, if I'm looking at George's work, right? He's got the human exploitation manuals and the 2 American geographers, Isaiah Bowman and Eugene Vernon. So what he's doing, if you can see these images, is he's including the text within the photograph, right? And then editing on top of that. And this kind of contextualizes, but then of course you've got something radically different like Yushin. And again, in speaking about images and the importance of, you know, adding words or not, again, this and the omissions, importantly, right? So she hasn't mentioned what Instagram account she's using, but she's taking the image and she's you can see the saying here, it says, "My mom says I'm special, so F you." That was originally on the cap. So she decontextualizes it by taking it out, displacing it within another realm, creating a kind of sticker, And then the text that would have been held below hand in the Instagram account, she displaces as well. So she's completely decontextualizing, deconstructing to create new meaning, but as a political tool. And again, earlier you mentioned Brecht, and he would use this as an alienation technique, or what the Russian formalists call the Verfremdungseffect, right? As an absolute political tool to get people to think. You can decontextualize it, you know. So if I hadn't explained this process, maybe you wouldn't understand the connection between the image and the text. But with knowledge and with speaking, with conversation, with cross-cultural understanding, you begin to understand further, and that enriches us, right? But if I see this and I don't know, I'm pushed to know, you know, I'm inspired to learn, and through that you get a thinking audience. So I think it's crucial.
And I think it's like when you were working on the project, Javiera, and that at that moment when COVID kind of hit us, and we learned to know that whether it's possible to do like a physical exhibition at all or not, and we were kind of, you were thinking the how to display that online. I think especially in Yushin case, it's really wonderfully displayed there. It's really working, and in a way that you were just explaining, that's something that I really found very, very clever way to how it's displayed online, and this kind of those moving texts which you can find there, and then it's kind of how the text starts to live like a own life, and when you like reconstruct the image like in a very visual way in front of your eyes. So congratulations, it was a really great way.
Thank you, but that was also Yushin. She came up with that because she wanted an aesthetic of kind of, you know, when the internet began and you had these like moving things. She wanted to kind of mix those two together, and it works really well. And I think the interesting thing is that we actually have the exhibition happening. Unfortunately, it couldn't happen at Mata. It couldn't happen in Lisbon in live format, but we are having the exhibition in July at the Sala Grande of the Palazzo Santa Margherita in Modena. So
wonderful.
And we're in the process of kind of constructing the stage, as it were, and breaking up the space. And again, when you walk into the space, you'll see Yushin's work, and I think it's very powerful to displace this kind of from Instagram into real life space. And because it's such a grand kind of, you know, the internet is obviously a huge space for thinking and for wonderful things happening, and also for a lot of abuse. But to take it from that world into a visual kind of space where we can interact with it without really, you know, having the motion of looking at our phones is a really, really interesting thing.
Just wanted to add, Javiera, that the exhibition is also taking place in June in Poland at the Parallel Review. So postponed twice and then happening twice.
Wonderful. So nice to hear. So nice to hear. Yeah, and it's also wonderful. I really like the way how we've been working on Yushin project, because it's like usually we look at Instagram on our mobile phones, and this kind of this how it has been migrated from this format, this screen format, into our laptops and in the physical space with this kind of physical body to be able to encounter it. It's really hope to see that.
Yes, and also it's not a conventional you know, image or photograph where it's hanging neatly. Generally it's being conceptualized to hang. So this hanging movement, also there's a little bit of wind, it moves, and it creates a whole other dynamic.
Okay. Anna y Javiera, what challenges does digital present us? Do you welcome the presentation of photography on digital platforms? Or do you see this practice of digital dissemination, especially in recent months?
Yeah, look, I think that's a wonderful question, and I think it's also incredibly complex. To be honest, I think, and it's something that I'm learning more and more as I live in Europe. Coming from the south of the continent, I've always felt, and of course, myself being an immigrant in South Africa, I created a community of friends, a community of colleagues. And being in Europe, I'm recreating that, but I know it's a very different way of being, right? And something I'm missing is that community. So when you speak of, what is your question? The digital...
The digital presence.
Yeah, digital presence.
Yeah,
this is where I'm going to. I think the digital presence is, of course, incredibly important, especially now with the crisis we're facing. However, I do feel I am much more an analog person, and this is why I'm speaking about community, because I think it's incredibly important to have things, yes, in the digital, right, format, but also to go to a place where you can see something and converse with people and share ideas. I think the world is generally a cold place, and we need to have more conversations. We need to have more dialogue. We need to create a sense of community and a sense of place where we can interact. So yes, I think it's important, but I think it's more important to continue to kind of foster this exchange between, you know, a live presence. Yeah.
And what do you think, Anna?
If you are referring to the COVID situation and what it made visible for widened audiences, I would say that there's like nothing new has happened actually. It's just like a institution, like art institutions and artist-run spaces and artists and photographers have had presence online already since decades, already since very early internet in 1990s. And maybe that's something that has looked a bit aside from the perspective of bigger institutions. And what COVID, the good side of COVID, if we try to find something good in that pandemic, is that now these practices and sharing images online and also sharing this as we are doing it from very different locations on different parts of the world and being able to meet, it's making visible practices and possibilities that were already present but was not so used by wider audiences and wider group of people. But yeah, however, as Javiera, I think it's we can have this kind of a very close communities also online and communities that are very deeply engaged in like a conversation on photographies and conversation of images or whatever kind of a friendship. But it's very different than this kind of physical interaction. And I think that it's also like, it's emphasizing different sides of human beings, that if you are like a verbally talented, you are functioning much better online than if you are kind of a clumsy verbally. It also points out to language differences, like bodily gestures, this kind of a chemistry between people, pheromones, like it's really like a senses. We are kind of emphasizing different senses than when we are interactive bodily and physically with people.
But do you think that the curatorial work will change, in particular from now on, regarding the conceptualization of projects and exhibition? We'll have to have to think more about the screen.
Oh yes, but I think we've done that already since decade. But that's like now it's mandatory. Now it's obligatory. Now you cannot look aside anymore. Now, and it's also of course it gives some democracy too. Like if we think of this kind of geographical kind of accessibility. But on the other hand, it's also polarizes group of people in terms of like, do you have devices? Do you have online connection? Can you kind of buy the programs that you might need to launch your website or whatever? So it's a new, like now these questions that were former probably dealt with smaller groups of people. Everyone needs to face them. That's what I think. But I think that of course we must think of screen, but we already had to do that before. I think social media brought that to us. So it's as we know that internet, it's kind of a part of our like a daily life, and it's not good or bad. It's both.
Okay. Yeah, I think Anna, it's important what you're speaking of, because you're speaking about accessibility, you know, and whether, Sandra, you could speak about the screen, you could also bring in the museum, right? Because in terms of accessibility, yes, you, me, all four of us might be able to access a screen. We might be able to access a museum, right? But it's not accessible to all, you know, and you've got free Fridays or free Tuesdays in some parts of the world. But it really, it also is a dangerous thing because it can reinforce the divisions. And it's not just the divisions in low income countries. It's division even in Texas right now with what's going on with the blackout, no running water, no hot water, no electricity. So it's an interesting thing you mentioned. I think it should be, it of course has to exist. And like Anna was saying, it's existed since the 90s. It's obviously been reinforced to another degree now with this crisis. But I think we also have to look at alternative methods.
And it's still, sometimes it's easy to forget that it's maybe 60% of human beings have opportunity to access internet. So it's not everyone. Exactly. And it's very easy to kind of think of that now we all are online. Who we all? Yeah. We from like Western countries and North.
47,
I was thinking that if it's informal now, I would like to, it's what because when now I was so happy to receive this catalog. Yeah. And also go through, because we part of this curatorial process was also this interaction with photographers, and it was really wonderful see how curatorial or curators interact with photographers and vice versa. But also when I was looking at your catalog and the website, and also what you mentioned about George Selly's work, when you said that the contextualization happened when he brought images, or he found images from archive and added text to them, it's really wonderful project. I really, really like it. But it's also, I think it's really good example how it's like to think of what made this specific project possible, like what kind of advantages George had in order to access those archives, in order to go those places, in order to have that all knowledge, because he has a huge knowledge. He has really, really read on these topics, and through that knowledge, he's able to create this contextualization. And but also, like when we're talking about like a quality of this project, it's very much related to his ability and the background he has as a male, as a white, as an English speaking, as a really, really nice person too, in order to access those. And this persistence to find out more and more, and also look for more information. So I really think that this is a big part of your project, how the secrets are opened, and also this kind of what I said about this kind of a curatorial process as an educational process in this kind of very dialogical sense.
Yeah, I think Anna, with regards to George's project, it definitely, we all without a doubt are in a position of privilege, you know. And I know I've been able to access it being in this context, because the context I come from, I might not have this access, right? I think with regard to George's work, the privilege was also being in contact with different people in America, in Latin America, because the project began a bit before.
Yeah.
So that knowledge base comes from conversations, and of course in Latin America, dealing with Spanish speakers, whether it's in Panama or Mexico. He mentioned 2 people he had met, but I can't remember their names, but I think they were from Mexico, I think. Yeah. But also, yes, it's a production of knowledge. It's the insemination kind of history, and also it's a creativity around looking at the context and seeing how it can work. So the manual itself was just a manual, right? As you can see in the catalog. But what we had to do with regards to COVID, you know, it was just going to sit as a manual. Of course, people can't touch anything during COVID, so you had to reconceptualize. And what we came up with in Portugal, for Portugal rather, was to kind of have an installation, but also have it all set up, you know, neatly packaged. And this is, Sandra, earlier you were saying about how things are being transformed. And this is one of the ways that we have to recontextualize our thinking and be really flexible and malleable in how we regard the visual and museum spaces, or not necessarily museum spaces, but exposition spaces, right? So this is one way that we opened that up and kind of deconstructed the book into an installation to make it work, to show how broad the project is, because he's looking at dictators that were trained in Panama up until recently. So, and the school still has a YouTube video. It's insane. But yeah. And yeah, the book was, the catalog itself was made by Marco Comastri, and he used like transparent pages, you know, to transmit this idea of transparency. Yeah.
Very well. Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Javiera, for this great conversation, okay, and for raising so many interesting questions related to the works and related to the curatorship. Thank you. And
thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Javiera. And
thank
Rebecca.
you so much. It was such a pleasure to see you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Good luck.
Yeah,
Take care.
bye-bye.
Bye.